Hi everyone, so today I'm going to try and put together everything we've learned about the unit circle thus far. You've learned the degree measures and why they're important on the unit circle, where they come from, what a radian is, and then we turned those degree measures into radians. And then we looked at the actual coordinate points that we found using the special right triangle relationships. And then we learned about our quadrantals. Okay, so let's see if we can fill just in quadrant one. Okay, so quadrant one, we know we're starting at 0 degrees, and then it's 30, 45, 60, and 90. Okay, and then we know that in radians, it would be 0 radians, pi over 6 radians, pi over 4 radians, and then pi over 3 radians. 90 is pi over 2. Okay, and then we learned our coordinate points. We remembered that cosine is our x value, and sine is our y value, and that tangent, another way to consider tangent, is sine over cosine. Sine over cosine. Okay, so we ended up getting root 3 over 2, 1/2, and the tangent worked we put on the outside, so tangent would be root 3 over 3. We got root 2 over 2 at pi over 4, root 2 over 2, and the tangent would be 1. And then at pi over 3, we know that the sine and cosine from 30 degrees just flip. So 1/2 root 3 over 2, and then our tangent would be root 3. Okay, let's put in our quadrantals. Quadrantals are based on the fact that the unit circle has a radius of 1. So for example, this line would be 1, which would make this coordinate point 1, 0. The coordinate point here would be 0, 1. All the way over here at pi radians, or 180 degrees, would be negative 1, 0. And then all the way down here at 3 pi over 2 radians, or 270 degrees, would be 0, negative 1. Okay, so let's do the tangents at those points, okay? So the tangent would be sine over cosine, so 0 over 1, which would mean the tan is 0 at 0 degrees or 0 radians. The tangent at pi over 2 would be 1 over 0, so tangent would be undefined. At pi would be 0, and then at 3 pi over 2 would be negative 1 over 0, which is undefined. A student once reminded me that she always used to say, Coach Red, tangent is undefined under the x-axis. So it helped to remember that these two values at pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2 was where tangent was undefined. Okay, so then we continued the unit circle by using degrees and radians, and we learned that radians was actually easier to work with. So I'm going to plug in those, and I want you to try and put in all the radians and all the degrees. Press pause right now, and then come back and see how you did. Okay, I'm back with just quadrant one, again, radians and degrees. Okay, and then let's put in the next set in quadrant 3. All right, and so then remember that based on the radian measure, the reference angle tells us what our value would be. For example, at 5 pi over 6, the reference angle is pi over 6. So the coordinate point is going to be exactly the same, root 3 over 2, 1/2, and root 3 over 3. The problem is we're in quadrant 2, which means that the cosine, the x values, would be negative. So it would be negative root 3 over 2, and since one of those is negative, that makes tangent negative. So we can fill in the remaining quadrant 2 points. Three, the pi over 6 angle is going to have the 7 pi over 6 is going to be the exact same point as pi over 6. Root 3 over 2, 1/2. However, the values are going to both be negative because the x and the y are negative, which is going to make the tangent positive. Okay, so let's go ahead and plug in those points. And then our last quadrant, the same thing is going to happen. The pi over 6 angles are going to be the same. 11 pi over 6 is going to be the same as pi over 6. 7 pi over 4 the same as pi over 4. And 5 pi over 3 the same as pi over 3. So let's go ahead and put those in as well. But again, in this case, cosine would be positive because the x's are positive. And now y would be negative, which would make tangent negative as well. Okay, so we've filled in our unit circle, and we're going to have to keep practicing this, and I gave you guys opportunity to do that on purpose games. Okay, how do we use it? So remember I've said to you that really the only thing I want you to 100% know is your radian measure and quadrant one. I don't want you memorizing the whole unit circle, so I want you to know your quadrantals, so the ones right here, 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 and here. And I want you to know quadrant one, sine, cosine, and tangent. So I'm going to go ahead and write the tangents in here. Root 3 divided by 3, 1, and root 3. And then I'm going to put in my other quadrantals over here, which would be -1, 0, and 0, -1. Okay. All right, so how do we use it? You want to use the reference angle to help you. So tangent of 135, okay? That's in quadrant 2. I don't want the quadrant 2 angle. I know that all the angles that have a 5 in them, their reference angle from the unit circle is going to be 45. So really I want the tangent of 45. But I need to get its positive or negative based on the quadrant. So this is what I do. Where is tangent 135? In quadrant 2. Tangent in that case is negative, okay? So I find the reference angle, which would be 45 degrees. So the tan of 45 degrees would be 1, and so it would be -1. All right, let's try this next one. 7 pi over 6. What quadrant? Okay, well, 6 pi over 6 is right here, so that means 7 pi over 6 is in quadrant 3, okay, where sine would be negative, okay? The reference angle is pi over 6. So that means that I want a negative sine of pi over 6. Okay, well, pi over 6 is 1/2, so my answer would be -1/2. Okay, let's try again. Cosine 5 pi over 3. All right, the cosine 5 pi over 3 would be in quadrant 4. Why? Well, because 6 pi over 3 is here, is 2 pi. So I'd be in quadrant 4. My reference angle is pi over 3. So that means that I want cosine of pi over 3. Cosine is positive in quadrant 4, so I really just want the cosine of pi over 3, which is 1/2. See, that's how I'm using these guys and the reference angle. Okay, again, this is in degrees. I'm going to mostly test you on radians, but cosine of 240 would be in quadrant 3. Okay, cosine is negative. The reference angle, remember when we're looking for reference angles in degrees, that's 240 degrees. So the reference angle is the acute angle formed with the x-axis. So I'd have to do 240 minus 180 to get that angle, which would give me a 60-degree reference angle. So my reference angle would be 60 degrees. All right, so that means that I want a cosine of 60. However, we know that we're negative, so I need a negative cosine of 60. The cosine of 60, let's go back up and look, it's 1/2, so this would be -1/2. All right, one more step, one more add-on. What about the reciprocal functions? Remember, we have sine, cosine, and tangent, and each one of those has a reciprocal function. Sine's reciprocal is cosecant, cosine's reciprocal is secant, and tangent's reciprocal is cotangent. I don't really like using the reciprocal function because it confuses me because then I'm like backwards. So I use the function itself and then I flip my answer. So for example, secant 2 pi over 3, I'm going to first identify the quadrant, which is quadrant 2. All right, its reciprocal function is cosine. So that means that I'm going to find the cosine. The reference angle is pi over 3, so I'm going to find a cosine of pi over 3. I have to remember cosine is x, and in quadrant 2, cosine would be negative. So I want a negative cosine of pi over 3. So the cosine of pi over 3 is 1/2, so it would be -1/2. But I was not looking for cosine, I was looking for secant, so I have to reciprocate it, which means flip. So my answer would be -2. So the secant of 2 pi over 3 would be -2. All right, let's try cosecant. The reciprocal function is sine. 5 pi over 6. Okay, 5 pi over 6 would be in quadrant 2 because 6 pi over 6 is pi. Sine is positive in quadrant 2. Then I identify the reference angle. 5 pi over 6 reference angle would be pi over 6, so I want a positive sine of pi over 6, which would be 1/2. Okay, but I don't want sine pi over 6, I want cosecant, so I flip it, 2. All right, cotangent, 3 pi over 2. Ooh, that is a quadrantal right here. Cosine, let's see, so that coordinate point would be 0, -1. This one's a little bit harder. Tangent is undefined here. Okay, so remember, undefined means -1 over 0. So when I reciprocate it, I'm actually going to get 0 over -1, so 0. So the cotangent at 3 pi over 2 is 0. Okay, so remember, where tangent is undefined, cotangent will be 0. All right, last one, secant of 240. All right, so first I'm going to be finding the cosine. Then I need the reference angle. So we've already done 240, but remember, 240 is here, so my reference angle would be this guy right here. So I'd have to take 180 away from 240, so 240 minus 180, which would be 60 degrees. So I want a cosine of 60 degrees. I have to recognize I was in quadrant 3 where cosine is negative. Okay, cosine is negative. All right, so negative cosine 60. Cosine of 60 would be 1/2, so it's -1/2. But I need to reciprocate that, so it would again give me -2. All right, guys, hopefully that was helpful. You might want to go back to this video when you're trying to evaluate trig relationships or trig functions, okay? Have a great day.